Evelyn mentioned, the subject of this session is supporting a healthy information ecosystem. But before we crack on, I'd like all my esteemed guests and panelists to introduce themselves before we start. So over to you guys.
Morning, everyone. I'll start ladies first, probably. My name is Olya, and I'm a global digital lead at OMD worldwide, working across a variety of CPG brands. Very excited to be a part of this quite important discussion for our industry.
Thanks, Olya.
I'll go next. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lopez. I'm working at Johnson & Johnson, currently heading up digital media and content for the region, for the EMEA region.
You're mute, Sébastien.
Of course. Hello, everyone.
Go with one.
That's very trendy to be muted, you know. My name is Sébastien Meilhaud. I am the global procurement lead for media and digital at Danone.
Fantastic. Benoit.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Benoit Cacheux. I'm the global chief digital officer for Zenith, in charge of digital strategy for our global clients. Very excited to be part of this panel.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you. So you could say it's been an interesting year. 2020, our world was changed by a series of unprecedented events, a devastating pandemic to global movements for social justice. Whilst we hope to have learned during this time, these events have demonstrated the importance of reliable information and from trusted publishers, and the subsequent impact on the brands and the consumer. During that same period, at the same time, we did a Harris poll that found that 80% of consumers feel that it's the brand's responsibility to ensure that ads are appearing on brand-safe environments. In addition to that, 2/3 of consumers say they would likely abandon a brand if they've seen unquestionable content. So, to my first question, knowing this, how can brands and agencies hold true to consumer expectations? Sébastien, I think you're going to kick us off. Sébastien, you hear me? I think Sébastien is blocked. Andy, would you like to kick us off on the first question?
Sure thing. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. So I think that's a very relevant and important topic, and specifically for advertisers, as we know that it's actually most of our brand media dollars who are fueling or driving many of the platforms in the ecosystem, right? And this approach applies both for safe and non-safe platforms, right? There's not always an easy way to differentiate both of them. So that's why, from an advertiser perspective, there is a responsibility, right? And the media dollars that we invest have a responsibility into driving or making bigger platforms or content creators that actually create harmful or non-harmful content. I think what is key, aside from holding the ecosystem accountable, is really making sure that as an industry we get together and we embrace industry standards as the 3 levels that have been driven through the GARM initiative: the control measurement, the integration, and the reporting. And not only holding itself true for the big players, but also extended this to the whole ecosystem.
So there's a role of responsibility for all of us, I think.
Exactly.
Sébastien, can you hear us?
We are trying to solve these technical issues. You can't hear us.
Benoit, Olya, I know from an agency perspective, I know Olya, you're obviously focused on the brand decision framework. Give some context around how that fits in with all this.
Yeah, I think there are probably a couple of points to make here. First of all, absolute agreement with Andre that we have like billions of dollars that go into what we do. And most importantly, consumers last year proved that brand activism is a true thing and they want to see real decisions. So when it comes to then what agencies can do to help brands to make right decision in terms of which publishers they should spend with, this is where products like brand decision framework that we rolled out across our Omnicom client comes in. Basically, it's a data-led approach to inform decisions, the types of publishers that you want to be in, because we know it's not about the page you're in anymore. It's about the business you show up next to. And it doesn't matter, is it just your message or is it right now a bigger publisher you work with? So we basically believe that this is something we should be looking at to do across our standard publishers and programmatic, but also looking into the social ecosystem and beyond. And second point from what we observed last year is that amongst large businesses, we see such a brilliant growth of importance of safety and suitability, and specifically not just from digital people, but actually moving to marketing agenda and putting this into a part of the planning, which is quite impressive. And this growing trend should help us to create that better ecosystem.
Yeah, I think there's a change in social expectation from the consumer, and therefore we as an industry or business need to kind of be reflective of that and make sure we adhere to that expectation. Sorry, Benoit, you were.
No, I mean, I was going to come back to this point around understanding consumer expectations, because there's, obviously there's different sides to this this discussion. There's the way we, brands need to protect themselves. There's the way agency kind of define frameworks for that protection. But actually, so I mean, the study that you were talking about before, I think there's no doubt that consumers are, want to see brands in brand safe environments, but it's how you define it. And there's a lot of research that's actually shown that if you if you're advertising in a reputable news website, the ones that are established where we know that the journalistic practices are they've been established years and years ago, if you're advertising, for example, next to a potential terrorist attack, consumers actually are, they're smart enough to understand the difference between advertising and news. And the research actually shows that there's no negative connotation on the brand if you're actually advertising next to this type of event. So there's been a lot of research around this. And I know obviously brands want to be very careful and sometimes want to avoid this type of association, but it's, to a certain extent, the open web and a lot of those newspaper and publishers are supported by advertising. And if brand safety is effectively cutting their funding, then over time, this has a negative impact on the quality content that we're going to see over time. So it's, it's never clear cut, the approach of brand safety. It's evolved so much in the last few years in terms of the sort of impact it's having. And I think it's great that we're continuing to look at, better frameworks to do it, and also a lot of smarter technology in terms of understanding the context. But there's some, sometimes I think people tend to look at it in a very this type of content, we cannot be associated with it. Yeah. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that as well.
Yeah. Sébastien, you back on with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Hey.
I really decided, to be a bit different this morning. Well, totally aligned with what Benoit was saying, because sorry, it was the only one I could hear. But what I can say from my side, from Danone side, is that this perception of the consumer for us being responsible of the environment we are advertising in, it is something that we started to tackle 4 years ago, by introducing direct contract with ad verification solutions. So we have one preferred solution at Danone. We have pushed all our markets to systematically ad verify their campaigns. That was our number one step. Then we have integrated viewable CPX in our KPI frameworks. So we are challenging our media operators, mainly agencies, to consider those KPIs and optimize against them. We have integrated this into our media performance dashboards. And very important point also in terms of integration, we have integrated this in our contract with media agencies to make sure that we have a common objective to have qualitative inventories. That's the way for us that we can be in control and responsible.
So it sounds like you've been on a journey that kind of started with a third-party verification, if you like, and then goes into measurement. So that kind of leads us on to how do we develop and deliver against a set of actions that help us to build process and protocols that enable us to be successful on that? So, Ando, do you want to pick that one up?
Sure. So I think that it's important that we take on some, and this is kind of an initial thought that we're having, but it's really about how do we bring good collaboration between not only partners, but also think about existing initiative, but also thinking about disruptive initiatives, right? Because one of the key topics that we've been thinking quite a lot is, and to Benoit's point earlier, it's not always about brand safety, it's also about brand suitability, right? But also one of the key elements when it comes to brand safety is also content verification, right? How do we make sure that we stop the spread of misinformation, right? And we're starting to look at, for example, some initiative that could enable to regain the trust from the consumer, because ultimately content verification, when you're in an extremely valid publisher, I mean, you give it for granted, right? But when you're not an extremely valuable publisher, you may not know whether the content is there is actually right or wrong, right? Is misinformation or not. So how could the industry think about disruptive initiative that could enable this content to be verified, for example, through initiatives like blockchain? We've seen blockchain be used for other initiatives to actually verify the ownership, or they say the source, right, of many elements. Why couldn't we go through this path, right, to enable content verification across the industry in places where, you know, you could question it? So it's really, I think that the industry is moving fast, the technology is moving very good and extended to many platforms. But I think we could even go further.
Sure. It's as if we need to build an ecosystem that there's a ticks of a number of boxes. It's that piece around brand safety and suitability. It protects brand equity. It helps drive investment within those businesses that are legitimate, and hopefully prevents revenue going to businesses that are illegitimate. I think that's really fundamental to this. To your point, that kind of role of misinformation and people monetizing that is disrupting what is right within the ecosystem. Olya, I know kind of you mentioned the decision framework. How does that feed into around supporting news, supporting relevant information, and making sure there's transparency in terms of that framework?
The key is the fact that it is a data-led approach. So when we are looking at working with specific publishers, and we have that in Zenith, work with a variety of those, they all know that we are doing that. They all know that we do give an opportunity to our advertisers to evaluate them, and evaluate them from various standpoints, using third-party sources like Nielsen studies, understanding what the values are of those publishers, what's the quality of their platform, their content, etc. And in the end, to receive an absolutely kind of objective result to where this publisher fits against the values of a particular brand. And as guys mentioned earlier, it is about suitability, but suitability is different for brands, and the values are different again, and where one brand feels comfortable to be in, other is not. But what we do is we make sure that by we encouraging publishers to obviously share more information about their content and their platform, that then help advertisers to make informed decisions. But in addition to that, like we talk about obviously publishers and technology, but there are two players in the ecosystem that we need to think about, and those are governments and consumers, who also start chipping in into what we do and into the quality of our digital and advertising, etc. So one of the things that we probably could be doing more of is educating our consumers as well, because they go into the content environment, and as you said, they might not know if it's a good or bad content, is it true or false, but we should educate them on these points, help them to understand what good content means, and help them to know how to report if the particular content is not good enough. Yeah, and that means we are spreading that responsibility, and we are encouraging publishers, advertisers, and the whole ecosystem to think about every customer who could be there, who can provide feedback.
Yeah, and I think Sébastien, you mentioned that journey you went as a business to start with the verification, then the measurement. Did you go through that same education internally within your organization, making sure that the people within the various teams were informed and understanding what was going on in the marketplace, and how they should react or be informed to make sure actually they're making the right decisions, not just in terms of what's relevant, but how you then feed that back into media investment, etc.?
Yes, totally. We internal education is key. At least for our marketers to understand where it is safe for their brand or not, for our media managers community as well, managing the relationship with their media agencies or with their media campaigns operators. So yes, for sure, we did that, and but not as not alone, in fact. With the support of national or international advertisers association that helped us a lot, yes, to educate, to also have the right conversations with our stakeholders, external stakeholders, the media agencies, the publishers, to measure properly what we can ask for and what is a little bit more challenging to ask for. And this has been very helpful at Danone to land where we are today. We are totally aware that the journey is definitely not over, and this is an ongoing, evolving environment with new technologies deployed every day, you know, to build and validate traffic and so on. And for that, the support of those national and international advertisers association for me is key to be aware and to keep educating, and at the same time also to make sure that we have the right conversation with some key members of the industry, and specifically the big digital publishers and social media ones. Because you know, no matter the size you are as an advertiser, alone you're no one. Together you are strong.
Yeah. Benoit, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, no, I think the point around collaboration is absolutely critical. So you know, there's I think that this is one area of ad verification where there's so much collaboration going on between agencies, between clients, and all the different organizations. So, you know, we actually as an organization recognize the importance of this topic by setting up a team that was just completely dedicated to actually defining digital standards in general and being very focused on brand safety. So that team is just purely focused on that topic. So it's not just something they do on the side. And, you know, as everyone on the panel is mentioning, this topic is evolving. So that collaboration is absolutely critical to actually try to have a positive impact, because there's always, whilst you've got kind of brand safety flaws, you've got all sorts of things in place, there's always a risk out there for potential issues and then creating kind of, you know, crisis for some brands. But, you know, I think what's important as well is, and this is part of this education, is sometimes we, you know, and quite often actually we tend to lump together viewability, brand safety, ad fraud, they're presented as one topic, and they are actually very different topics with very different implications. And you know, even just one small thing is by blocking a lot of either publishers or keywords, which tend to be kind of the historical way of doing it. In some cases, you can actually block advertising on potentially minority-owned publishers and creating kind of an unfair way of actually allocating media dollars from advertisers. So, you know, these are all the things, all the different topics that if you don't have this collaboration, this, you know, this education, you're not necessarily aware of the implication, and you might be looking at things in a slightly myopic way.
And we start to kind of defund those that we should fund and fund those ones we shouldn't. Well, you referenced the digital standards. Do those standards evolve and change, do you think, depending on the brand or the advertiser? If we think about brand safety, brand suitability, they're obviously very different, but do those standards change depending on the category or the field or the advertiser, do you think?
Well, I think they definitely change. They also, you know, and I think we've made a reference to this, is also you need to add the cost element. I think Sébastien was mentioning this before, is, you know, whilst obviously there's certain elements where you just need to make a decision and have principles that you stand by, you also need to look at the implications of what the costs are, because, you know, you could also say, you know, all the problems come from potentially social platforms and user-generated content in programmatic environments, and therefore I'm just going to not advertise in those areas. But if you're not looking at cost, if you're not looking at, you know, the levels of engagement that you're creating, again, you're potentially making the wrong wrong decision. So I think that's just something to bear in mind. It's just effectively what it means is you have to take the time to look at this seriously, run different pilots, and there's a bit of a test and learn approach. I don't think there's a one size fits all for everyone. And that also that kind of dichotomy that still exists of brand advertising versus performance advertising, you might have a slightly different approach as well.
And that kind of brings us to how do you build a framework where there's a fair value of the services across the entire business? There's a true value exchange, the services that are being delivered. I mean, what's everyone's opinion around that kind of value exchange in terms of how things have been delivered now and how we can improve? And I think that one. Excellent.
Okay, well, should I start? I mean,
Go for it.
let's go for it. So I think that we have a variety of frameworks that's been built across different organizations, etc., to actually look into what is the quality of ecosystem and what is the outcome for potentially for advertisers. And yeah, and I would say the key is to keep building that transparency, within it. So within programmatic supply chain, we have already significant progress, and right now our clients see, and I mean, probably Sébastien and Andre can confirm, you have more control over how you invest, where you invest, and you can actually transparently see every possible placement, and you can use pre-bids to actually control, monitor, etc., what you do. And verification technologies and constant development helps with that. When it comes to, and I think this is the very fair kind of, as fair as it gets right now, but we still can work obviously all together on making it stronger and taking out that unknown deltas within the supply chain and understanding what is the right percentage to invest in ad verification to make sure that's enough. Because also you never know. It is not a part of the latest analysis that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example. So it's something that should be added in, so we understand what is the value of the ad verification technologies we use based on the outcome that the brands get. But when it comes to social, I think we are in the beginning of the journey, and it's really good to see that organizations like GARM and then CASA within Omnicom and others have been working together to push the standards and create these opportunities for brands to have greater control over adjacency, and monitoring of where we place, how we place. And I think this is a big area to keep working on and collaborating together to encourage those walled gardens to take great responsibility. And they start doing it, which is again amazing, like how massive businesses within a year already turn themselves around to start accounting for that.
I think it's everyone's responsibility to drive that very much. If we look as we go into next year with the deprecation of cookies, those walled gardens, you might say, there'll be more of them.
Yep.
And will always be higher. So there's absolutely like a responsibility for us as an industry and ecosystem, make sure everyone takes self-ownership, but also there's governance around that.
And I think to your point, Olya, if I may add, I think what I 100% agree with you. One of the biggest wins within the GARM working group is actually the aggregated measurement report that they launched. I think it was last month, where actually it's really building standards across the different social platforms or walled gardens, as we wish, right? That enable advertisers to properly compare on equal basis, right? The different players, whereas before. And this is the value of standardization, right? Whereas before we should trust or we should look at them with different eyes. Right now we are able to compare on a like-for-like basis, and that gives quite a bit of, I would say, I don't know whether the word is comfort, but let's say comfort or peace of mind, let's say, to advertisers that on how can we assess our investments, or how can we assess the impact of them.
That measurement piece enables us all to start from a baseline. So the insurance becomes measurement, you start from a baseline, and then how do we build upon that? How do we kind of learn and understand and reinvest into media? Or how do we learn and understand where we should be investing in terms of kind of publishers, etc.?
Correct. And actually this baseline enables also to build your own measurement towards the impact, right? Because if you know that we have standard metrics, right, every advertiser can look at how those metrics impact consumers, right? Which they may be different, right? If they're all aligned across platforms, that enables a fair share of comparison.
Yeah,
and I would agree with Ander. I think one of the biggest issues that we've had is it hasn't really been a level kind of playing field across the different areas where you can advertise in digital, between social and programmatic. So, to a certain extent, there's been a lot more capabilities and ability to actually control what you do in a programmatic environment. And when we start looking at the social environment, it's obviously there's the ability to measure, but the ability to kind of compare things on a like-for-like basis, whilst you can look at numbers, the standards are not being applied in a same way across the different channels. So that's definitely something that needs to evolve, because you always hear that, well, the standards don't really apply to us in certain environments because we do things in a certain way, and it's driven by consumer behavior and the way they go through their social feeds. And there's always good reasons for certain arguments, but it just makes this whole aspect of looking at your kind of ad verification plan almost like there's a lot of silos within it that really need to be broken over time, I think. And the sooner the better. So the initiative from Ghana is obviously very, very positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And to go back to a point that you mentioned previously, Benoit, on being able like for like to compare different vendors inside and outside of the social environment can be also at the advantage of some smaller vendors that fight every day to exist and that are not considered, because today we do not have this like for like, and the efficient CPX cannot be calculated, and therefore you or your agency is doing some optimization choices that could be different if we could have this complete transparency. A last point that I wanted to emphasize is a little bit back to what Olya was saying before. Yes, we are making progress, but we still have an highway of progress, possibly. I see very often new technologies appearing to increase the supply chain transparency through programmatic. Those associations may help us as well to impose some minimum standards, minimum tracking. So setting up the right trackers, because I've been tested different solutions, and it's sometimes very frustrating to see how limited you can be because for very valid reasons, I guess some vendors do not impose themselves those trackers, so you remain blind even if the technology exists.
You change that conversation. I'm conscious of time, so to round off, in a few words, how would each of you share how we can help support the better ecosystem as we go out of this year and into next year? I think it's going on. Be great for a summary from each, and I think we'll be out of time by the time we get through. So, Olya, ladies first.
Well, thank you, Nick. Couple of things. I think professionally, as like part of digital and agency ecosystem, I would say we absolutely should put suitability and safety at the front of what we do, and take it beyond digital teams, beyond technology experts, start making it part of our brand planning and aligning it with the brand values as to set the baseline to where we want to appear. But then I think as Olya and myself, like person out of digital world, I'd say we have such a great advantage of knowing all this detail while other people don't. And if we bother to say to our family and a couple of friends and explain where the issues are and say, look, that's how you can actually understand what's good and what's bad. Or that's how you can actually report good or bad news or support good publisher that you really like. That like every little helps. And I think if each of us in this massive industry can do a little bit of this education, I think that's going to help as well.
So there's education, value exchange, supporting the ecosystem to drive strong publishing. Excellent. Benoit?
Just, yeah, a couple of things. So one, I think, is that focus on brand stability, but doing it also in the context of understanding what consumers are expecting, not just what's suitable for the brand, and also this focus on ensuring that we're not penalizing, news organizations and potentially smaller publishers, because obviously at the moment we know where the media dollars are being concentrated, and I think it's just making sure that we've got a healthy digital ecosystem in the future.
So I'd say driving brand protection, brand safety, but balancing that with scale, while adhering to supporting the publishers and kind of looking to not always block, but look at how we can look to expand.
And if I may add to this one, I think that from an advertiser perspective, there are many that take a passive role versus an active role, meaning a passive role is really about just measuring, just looking, just really blacklisting some elements. But I think that as media dollars fuel the ecosystem, and it's not always easy to say, it's easy to say, not always easy to act. I think that more pre-bid blocks actions should be taken so that those media dollars are not being fueled where they shouldn't be fueled. I think that with caution, as Benoit mentioned, with thoughtful analysis on where this blocking could happen to ensure that we are not misimpacting, but really making sure that we are taking an active role is key.
Yeah, I think again, it's that journey piece, the insurance piece, the measurement piece, and how do we take that data and understand how to drive performance and investment, especially in a pre-bid environment.
Exactly. I cannot agree more with what Anders has said, and I think we have an enormous opportunity just at the door with the cookieless happening more and more every day, and 2022 will be the turning point. To my point of view, this will be the opportunity for to develop clearly the contextual targeting and those pre-bid options allow to manage properly and control the context you're appearing in. So that helps the measurement for sure. That helps measuring the ROI, but also strategically that really plays a role that will become more and more major for many brands.
Yeah, maybe rather than the end of the world, it's a new beginning, right? Maybe we can reevaluate how we're communicating and driving personalized experiences to the consumer. Maybe we can use context and environments to drive the publisher ecosystem. Maybe we can drive and change advertising. So it's a fantastic